Welcome to the first in the Quarantine Collective series, wandering through books that sit behind me on shelves as I talk through their methodology, not simply their content. Today I'm going to be working with Copi and Langers' books on symbolic logic. You're going to hear references to them throughout. I'm going to even put up parts of them on screen, but don't just hear me say things, make a note of them, and commit that to memory. That's memorization. Instead here, we are learning. When people want to learn math, biology, chemistry, it is often the case that we start with the space of memorization of building blocks. Chemistry, for example, you might learn the periodic table, nomenclature for various compounds, states of valence electrons, all kinds of other stuff that I barely understand. And these elements that you have to know to do chemistry, that makes sense. But nobody would say that that memorized thing is doing chemistry. Take a couple days ago. Researchers at McGill University found a way to make hydrogels without those toxic chemical compounds as the element that generates the structure. Instead, they used ultrasound. Now imagine a tool that can use sound to build structures inside your body. I mean, sort of. You see, what I said there is actually pretty inexact and a little troublesome. See, I'm talking to you kind of casually. This is like how most people talk in everyday discourse. Inexact, messy, relying on the context of me, the presumed you, what this channel is, why you're watching it, and all of that. I'm not the researcher. Being exact is just not important to me. I even have the incentive to state crazy shit on this platform. So maybe instead the thumbnail should say, "Scientists discover how to rebuild organs without surgery." It's not wrong, but it's not right either. Now, chemistry has a huge set of rules and words and relations within the discipline where people could read the paper and then pick me apart pretty easily. They'd probably start in the comments by saying what hydrogel really is, that it can't really build organs explicitly, but maybe could possibly use to replace tissue or bolster the restructuring of tissue in certain places in the body, and that there's still chemicals. Of course there are. It's like saying, natural foods. There's still chemicals in everything. They're just not the toxic ones. And it doesn't really generate a structure that presupposes what they're doing. Instead, it actually can solidify a single point at a time, like a 3D printer. Each of these things is very exacting language, and it's in the paper. It has to be. They don't get to use casual language for these kinds of things. But we do. We use it all day, and we use it in online discourse. It's a thing you're going to find as you do this and you start thinking about this, just dealing with your children, your spouse, friends, a gaming clan, randos on Discord, or listening to some asshole talk on YouTube endlessly. Casual language is fine sometimes, but it doesn't work in the same way in every context. See, the casual language you use when talking to a friend presupposes that friend. It presupposes who they are, how you're talking to them, who you are, what that friend knows about you, what you know that that friend knows about you, and also the entirety of the world that you've both commonly shared. I mean, references are a thing, and this is incredibly complicated as a set of interactions that allows context for casual language. But that's the thing, is we always need that context, or at least complexity, for every conversation or piece of written or created media that has ever been said, period. It's the basis for everything we make. But this is the interesting part. See, I require that complexity still to communicate things to people who I have no context with. How do I do that? Yet many of you have never met me. Few of you, maybe, have seen a video I've made. With any luck, I've got a few of them. Go take them and go take them. It's good stuff. I'm proud of it. Some of you, most of you, probably have never, ever seen me before in any capacity. Yet, I am here communicating something to you, and I'm not failing. You're understanding my words. You generally get what I'm talking about. You even understand the general point I'm trying to make. An architect doesn't need to become friends with all the people who build his buildings. A filmmaker doesn't maintain close relationships with everyone who ever bought a ticket to his show or all the VFX people who work on it. Instead, these people and others rely on known languages, the language of cinema, the language of architectural blueprints, the languages of their discipline. That complexity is no longer that of simply relationships, casually, but now is something more. It's a larger set of rules. These rules are things that people agree on, that they work with in different discipline. And just like those, if I'm trying to write a philosophical work or read a philosophical work, I need to work with it at the same level of complexity that the nature of symbolic logic has is put forth by Copi and Langers here. This gives us a fantastic grounding for people to engage with far more complex singular sentences than they expect, and also to avoid making the mistake of not only your own inference, but inferring into what you're reading. Let's start with a very simple example of what symbolic logic works with. It's called relations, the relationship between things that you're speaking about. Complex terms are going to show up. Things like dyadic relations, dyad, two. It means like when I say Manhattan is in New York, connects two things, Manhattan, New York. Triadic, take a guess. You could say something like Cologne is between Paris and Berlin. It's triadic. Tetradic, it's four things, and so on and so on and so on. It's a relations conversation. Natural language, casual language, disguises the true degree of relations. Like, let's say I just type out and I say, I played Left 4 Dead with friends. Picture what that means in your head. What is the image you're pulling from it? What's the story you're pulling for that? What is Left 4 Dead with friends? Are those my friends? Did you think they were? Or were they friends with each other? Was it an 8-person round in versus where all 7 are friends of mine? Or was it an 8-person round where only the 3 on my own team were my friends? It's kind of inexact. You decided what the answer was immediately, though. You inferred. And this is the nature of logic, the nature of discussion, the nature of talking. You infer. And inference, according to Copi, and he explains it really, really well, this is the activity where one proposition is affirmed on the basis of one or more other propositions that are accepted as the starting point of the process. Now, logicians, as Copi says, are really not interested in the process of inference. That's not going to be our jam today. It's going to be our jam later on. You can join any of our Deleuze readings for that, or Rouillère, or any of the others. But instead here, for logicians, for symbolic logic, it's about the propositions that are the initial and the end point. The process and the relationship stated between them is the focus. And language does this. It hides logical meanings behind single words or multiple words with a huge amount of ambiguity. And ambiguity is this core function of the symbolic. We use it casually in everyday speech. Context shifts, and it shifts a lot. We understand that context implicitly all the time. We do it with weird words like is or it. It's a thing we are able to understand despite it being a word that has absolutely no meaning in and of itself. I have to go to Alice in Wonderland, the story of a mouse talking to a duck. It's a great set of lines. And even Stigand, the patriotic Archbishop of Canterbury, found it advisable. Found what? The duck asked. Found it. The mouse replied, of course you know what it means. Well, I know it and what it means well enough when I find a thing that's usually a frog or a worm. My question is, what did the Archbishop find? This implicit context often leads to misunderstandings. What's obvious to one person may not be to another. Another pretty famous one is the word is.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes.
Consider these sentences. The rose is red. In this case, is means an attribution of a property. Barbarossa is Frederick the First. Well, is, in that case, isn't property, but now identity. How about Barbarossa is a legendary hero? Well, is here kind of means the membership of a class or category. To sleep is to dream. Well, here it's none of those. It's entailment as sort of a necessity of one following the other. God is here just means exists. It's one word. I mean, we could even simplify that. All of these almost could be said as the rose is red. So let's say the rose as a symbol of the people, a socialist symbol, is red. Rose is red. It's a communist thing, right? A woman nicknamed Rose might be a communist. Rose is red. Or let's say a few years after Shawshank Redemption, I plant roses on the gravesite of Morgan Freeman's character. Someone comes along and says, what's that? What's that rose? I wistfully think to myself, that rose is red. Poetic, accurate in its own way, meaningful in its own way. Do you get it? Just as with Left 4 Dead with friends, you are inferring so very much that may or may not be grounded in what is being said by the exact same words. So, how do we deal with this problem? How do we ensure that when we're reading, we're putting things in the correct context and meaning as kind of built by the author or as written? Well, symbolic logic gives each of these a distinct representation. This eliminates ambiguity when you're going back through it. So, for example, here, if I have an attribute where the rose is red, I would write rose and then red in parentheses. If it's an identity, I would say rose equals red because it's the same in identity. If it's a class membership, you would say rose is red with that fancy little cool looking E. This is really about considering how you speak and write and read and understanding this process of how thoughts are brought forth. These things don't entail ambiguity necessarily. Sorry, I should say that speaking entailing ambiguity is false. It's because of kind of how symbolic things work themselves. Sure, you can say every word has an exact meaning somewhere. And again, we know that's bullshit. Words we say and use are contextual, contingent, made of pieces of things and tone and where we're at and who we're talking to. That inexacting thing is just conversation. It's talking. It's a child telling stories, which is fine. But we're here talking about we kind of need something more than just a child telling stories. Logic, used like this, it makes context explicit. It defines a universe of discourse, perhaps, the complete set of things that we are talking about. So, for example, if our universe we're talking about is houses, and we mark houses as A, B, C, or D, our relation to them is north of. We can make clear statements like A is north of B. There's no ambiguity. This explicit definition of context eliminates confusion, helps us focus on the actual logical relationships being discussed in the text. We're creating a game of sorts, defining boundaries, which give good room for play, which is really what's happening. But please don't go too far with this. Both Langer and Copi distinguish between subjective mental imagery and logical concepts. It's an important distinction. Your mental image of a house that's north of another, it might be picket fenced, a door, 2 stories, blue siding, nice trimmed grass with red roses kind of everywhere. But that's your subjective imagery. You're adding that in. You are inferring. The logical concept talked about here, the thing denoted, is just house. It's a symbol. Something that can be communicated precisely, regardless of mental imagery. And that's the deal here, is logic, it deals with abstractions, not conceptions, not images. precise communication despite differences in personal mental pictures. It's like math. If I say 2 plus 2, the concept of 2 and plus, those are the deals here, right? It doesn't matter if I'm talking about fingers, teacups, homes, or books. These abstractions come out in relation to other abstractions, not specifics. And that distinction is important. It helps us avoid getting caught in subjective experiences in reading when trying to reach logical conclusions. It's one of the reasons why people think logic is something that's super rigid, a place that's not for wandering, not for creativity. It's got harsh edges and rules. Where's the fun? You mean like a game, harsh edges and rules. Can't imagine anything that could be fun like that. And that's the thing, like any complicated game, the rigid rules enable an astonishing amount of play, like emergently massive amounts of it. And both Copi and Langers talk about this as the power of the symbolic. The power is how it allows us to make general statements efficiently. That's not boring bullshit. That's how you talk. It's how you reason. It's how you probably do most of the shit in your day. For example, instead of listing every specific case of everything whenever we're talking about stuff, because it would take forever, we get to use variables like X or A, right? Quantifiers. For all there exists to make general statements. So we can, rather than saying all humans are mortal, Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal, it's a lot of specifics. Like Socrates is a dude, I don't know him. I don't get, what the fuck? Instead, we can read this and look at the general pattern, the symbolic elements of it. We could say for all X, if X is human, then X is mortal. Then we can substitute and say if Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. It lets us step beyond the specificity of it, which is really where people get tripped up, and look at the underlying structures and how these things apply to countless similar arguments and how those things interplay. Variables and quantifiers. These things let us speak about patterns. It stops us from being stuck in individual cases. It makes thinking powerful and incredibly comprehensive. It gives us a chance to speak about things abstractly, like labor, libido, subjectivity, all those things that are necessary. That is not about your labor, your subjectivity. You get it? Because that's the thing. Man, we fuck this up all the time. We take generalities as specificities, or we speak specifically using general terms. Consider this statement. Flying planes can be dangerous. Now, I added a little bit of intonation there, but the question would be, did you take this to mean that the act of flying planes is dangerous, or that planes that are flying can be dangerous, or that planes on the ground are safe? Symbolic logic would clarify this, representing them differently, distinct proportions, and let us take the statement and see the structure of it to see its own sort of interplay. So we could say the activity of flying planes has the property of danger, for example, or we could say for all X. If X flying and X is plane, then X is dangerous. These distinct structures help us recognize ambiguity in how we talk. It lets us be more precise in our thinking and our reading. See, the above, it's not what we would put into a book on flying. Instead, we'd go through the process. We'd recognize ambiguity. We could write a better sentence, one that lets us really communicate what we want to say, using generalities to enable us to play with the abstract in a way that enables proper communication. It lets us be more effective and direct and help other people too. It would let us say, the activity of taking flight in a plane is dangerous under certain conditions. See, it changes that. Now take this very inoffensive simple statement and now switch it over. Talk about political arguments, designing computer systems, writing legal contracts, or just trying to communicate more effectively. These logical tools help you, and they do it through a couple things. First, they let you identify the true structure of an argument. Then they let you recognize ambiguity and eliminate it. They let you understand the actual relationships being put forth between concepts. They let you express complex ideas with a lot more precision. And ultimately, they let you be a better communicator or reader. Think about those debates on political, social issues. Toss that ambiguity above into the abortion debate or immigration, whatever it takes. People argue fiercely without realizing they're using the same words to mean entirely different things or making assumptions about context that others simply do not share. Entire logical structures of ethics that people have as the basis for their political understanding that's built on incredibly different realities at the core. They just simply can't communicate that way. If rhetoric is the center of every debate, and I tend to believe it is, the failure to communicate loses the investment of an audience immediately. It doesn't even matter what your rhetoric is or how good it is at that point. And that's kind of the last mistake we do. It's one of the worst. Don't get fucked up here and do the thing made famous by Reddit atheists. Logical analysis, symbolic logic, does not tell us what values to hold. No logic does that. Logic in all of this, and Langer and Copi and every logician out there goes out of the way to explain that logic is empty itself. It is symbolic. It is purely relational and abstract. So if someone says, well, logically, you can just ignore everything they say after that. Or, my favorite, well, logic says, goddamn, you suck, dude. You suck. Logic doesn't say shit. Logic no more says something and makes something true than it falsifies the illogical. It is an irrational belief that the sun will certainly rise tomorrow. There's reasons for it, but I can argue against it very easily. This irrational belief is absolutely not made false by its irrationality any more than the certainty of it happening tomorrow is the absolute truth. It's a tool. Logic is a method, a system of thought, one that those who don't understand it are continually stymied by, and those that do dive in are rewarded greatly. When you engage with philosophical works, and you're going to see in this video series us do that and me do it live, and it's going to be happening this Thursday as well. I'll talk about that in a second, but you'll notice that any work worth your time is filled with specificity and proper argumentation that follows the rules laid out by Langer and Copi, even Anti-Oedipus and Deleuze. And if you are engaging, you are doing it through a process where you are looking at not only what the propositions are within the sentence or the book, but also the inferences you are bringing to the reading. You are understanding the process of understanding as I'm talking about this. I spend a lot of time talking about Gilles Deleuze. It's one of the biggest things he puts forward that attracted me early on. And it's this idea of the image of thought that he says. It's not so much that thought is this thing that we have a priori, but instead that it sort of springs from us. It comes from us and is evoked by the world, interactions and internal processes that create and build thought that happens, and thought appears almost as a reaction to stimulus. This Thursday, I'm going to be hosting a very long and probably arduous live stream as we go through one section of each one of these books. We're going to read it together. We're going to discuss every little point. I'm going to show you how I read and how I engage these texts directly. And we're going to do it with the way the text is trying to teach us to engage with it. This mindfulness, awareness that symbolic logic and learning, this process can give you, is the first step on your important journey.